Welcome to Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. In the podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. Today on Ride to Success, I'm thrilled to welcome Michael O'Brien, a mindset and executive coach, speaker, podcast host, meditation teacher whose life has been transformed by cycling. Once high-flying corporate executive, Michael's world was upended by a near-fatal cycling accident, which he famously refers to as his last bad day. From that pivotal moment, he has harnessed the power of mindfulness and resilience to not only rebuild his life, but also to inspire others to overcome their own adversities. As an accomplished author and the creator of the Pause, Breathe, Reflect app, Michael dedicates his life to teaching the principles of resilience and recovery. Join me in this learning journey as Michael shares his story from adversity to opportunity, revealing how the lessons learned on two wheels can apply to all facets of life. But before we get into the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, please remember to subscribe to the podcast and follow the podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps me grow and continue to bring amazing guests to inspire you and take you on a learning journey. Now, back to the podcast. Welcome, Michael, to Ride Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
I can't wait for this, Pedro. I've been looking forward to this all week. We're going to have a great conversation about cycling and bikes, and I know a whole bunch of other things. So thank you for having me.
It's totally my pleasure. I mean, likewise, I've been looking forward to this podcast for weeks since I first got in touch. And there is a quote that I want to read from that you mentioned in the past, and I think it will help frame our conversation. And the quote reads like this: "Cycling is life. It throws everything at you, and you need to figure out how to keep pedaling." And I think this quote is so brilliant. There is so many dimensions to it. It's so tangible yet so deep. You can apply to anything, business, life. Yeah, but we will unpack it throughout the conversation. But first, I want to understand a bit more the origin story of your initial passion for cycling, where it came from, how it came about, so it gives a bit of context into the conversation. I mean, yeah, tell us a little bit more about how that came about.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I'm glad you found that quote. Like that's like, it's from my perspective, it's one of my favorites. If you can like one of your own quotes, so like I came into cycling when I really first felt the magic of it was the day I came off of training wheels. So,
oh wow,
as a little kid, I had a lazy eye, so I had to wear an eye patch. So my parents tried to tell me I was a pirate, but I wasn't buying that. I just looked different than all the other kids, and I also happened to be the last kid on my block that came off of training wheels. So I sort of felt like a little bit of the oddball. I had to wear this patch. I couldn't come off of training wheels for whatever reason, and I don't remember all the reasons. But there was one day. So this is the story I have in my mind. I'll give you a little bit more to it as well. That I came off of training wheels and I flew down the driveway into the road. Luckily, there was no traffic.
Whoa.
And no helmet, of course, because it's the 70s. And like in the 70s, just people did whatever. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. I can go anywhere. And so this story of like flying down our steep driveway, so I had this image. And maybe a couple of years ago, I drove past our old home. I went to go visit my parents. And I took my girls. I'm like, let's go see where Dad grew up, his first home.
Yeah.
And so I was expecting this like steep driveway, and it wasn't all that steep at all. It was just like maybe a 1% decline. But in my mind as a kid, it was like, this is super steep, and I got super fast. And I was like, whoa, like this is so cool. I can go places on my bike. I can yeah, I didn't have this vocabulary, but the sense of adventure. And I could ride my
Exactly.
bike
Yeah.
into town. I could ride my bike to school, although my mom grounded me for doing so. But I was like, I felt like my own person. And so that's when I first fell in love with the bicycle.
Hmm. Yeah, the bicycle is a great instrument. It, as a kid, when you get one, just the sense of freedom that you get just out of riding your bike, because all of a sudden you can go places that you wouldn't be able to go by walking, and it just gives you that a sense of adventure, which is, I mean, is exciting,
Yeah.
exhilarating as a kid. But even as an adult myself, I still feel the same feelings, and that's perhaps why I still keep cycling. Really,
Yeah. You
because
keep
as a
pedaling. Yeah. You keep, like, like I think all of us, we might have a favorite route that we ride maybe during the week, maybe it's an efficient cycle or workout or what have you. But every time I do this route, the ride is always different. And
yeah,
that is so cool. Like, it's not, people are like, you do the same route. Like, it seems like all the time on Strava, like during the week, which, I probably do, at least very frequently. But I'm like, it's never the same ride. It's always different. And
yeah.
that
Mm.
that part of it really excites me. Like, I never know what I'm gonna get on the ride. You never know what's gonna happen. And that's also true about life.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a brilliant analogy. I mean, yeah, you can nature itself. It's just you are always changing. So it's again a metaphor for life. Um, you can be doing the same commute back and forwards, but if you are aware, if you are present, then you can be noticing different things. You can notice the change of the seasons, people, etc. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all. It's, I guess it's about being the right mindset, being present in what you're doing, rather than wherever it is that you might be thinking about in your head, but focus on the present. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's like cycling as an activity, as a sport, allows people to be. It allows them to focus on the present. It's gonna, to some extent, function almost as a meditation, if you will. But that's kind of going. That's perhaps a bit too deep. It's not for everyone.
Yeah, it may not be for everyone, but like for the people that it is for, it I think it definitely rings true. So I do think cycling can be meditative. It can also be like really intense, but when we're riding, especially when we're riding with each other in a peloton and the
Yeah.
pace quickens, it is this beautiful way of like we're right there in the race, in the peloton. We don't really have liberties to think about all the shiny objects that get thrown at us. Like, we're tapping into our body, like the environment around us, what the other cyclists are doing. So in that way, it can be like this really great mindfulness practice. And yeah, just
Yeah.
for like a few minutes, like it's just like, okay, this was my focus. And how cool is that? Considering life today, we get thrown a whole bunch of different things all at once.
Exactly. Yeah. Very true. You mentioned as well that in part of in the past as well, that from that story, from that moment, from when you came off the training wheels, kind of like cycling became all encompassing from childhood to adulthood, to the point where you said in one of your previous interviews, where without it life would be incomplete. And I wanted to bring us to this point in your life where you call it my last bad day. You had a near-death cycling accident that changed the course of your life forever. And I wanted to, for the people that don't know you, I wanted you to to talk us through that experience and why is it that you call it your last bad day?
Yeah, so great question, Pedro. Happy to share. So like from that moment on training wheels, like the bike was always with me. Like, you got different bikes. I had a paper route, so
Oh,
I had a bike with a basket, which was the most geekiest thing probably you could have as a teenager. A 3-speed with a big basket out front where I put my newspapers to deliver it. My dad won this French racing bike. We thought it was a French racing bike. It was probably made in China, but it was a 10-speed bike at a church
okay.
bazaar, like a picnic. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then I started watching the Tour de France on TV. They had 20-minute segments when I was a young kid. And I was like, whoa, like this is so cool. Because although cycling was a part of my life, I was into traditional American sports like baseball and basketball and stuff
Okay.
like that. So I didn't become a competitive cyclist until I was getting out of high school, entering uni, as you guys would call it, or college here.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
so I raced like through the latter stages of my high school years and then through college. I took a little bit of a time off as I started my professional life. I got into running, did a few marathons,
Mhm.
did the Boston Marathon, and we had our 2 daughters were born. And at the time of this accident you referenced, they were 3.5 years old and 7 months old. And my wife and I had been married for 7 years at that time. We are now married 30 years. So the story continues. And so
Congratulations. Yeah, that's
I wanted to get back into competitive cycling. So my company had an offsite meeting in the state of New Mexico. So I brought my bicycle. Actually, it was my friend's Bike Friday, a travel bike, because I was traveling for work. I
okay.
was like, I think I might want to get one of those foldable bikes so I could ride when I'm traveling, so I can keep
Yeah.
my fitness up. So he had one. I borrowed it for this trip. I was doing some training. I had a local criterium to do, crit, and on the fourth lap, I had a 2-mile loop of this hotel property that we were at, a little resort out in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. And as I came around a slight bend, this Ford Explorer, this SUV, was coming at me like flying. It was so surreal. I was like, he can't, like, what is going on? Like, why
Yeah.
is he on my side of the road? He'll I know he'll see me. Well, what's happening? And I just couldn't react fast enough. And he hit me going about 40 miles an hour based on the skid marks.
Wow.
That's what they estimate, that they being the police.
Yeah.
And I still to this day can remember the sound of me hitting his grill. And then I got flipped into the air, and then into the windshield I went, and I broke a hole through the windshield. And then I heard the screech of his brakes. And then I came to the asphalt below, and I made like a thud and like a scream. That knocked me unconscious. I regained consciousness a few minutes later. I was surrounded by emergency professionals like police and ambulance and medics, and they called a helicopter to fly me to Albuquerque, New
Right.
Mexico, the only place where there was a trauma one center. And the doctors had told my wife the first surgery took about 12 hours. My wife came out with her youngest. They told her, hey, your husband's been in a very bad accident. We really don't know how he survived. The next 72 hours are going to be really critical. So like our whole
Wow.
world got turned upside down in a moment. And my wife later went on to say, the bike nearly killed you, but the bike saved your life. And so what saved my life was my fitness,
Mm.
because the accident, I broke a whole bunch of everything, but I lacerated the femoral artery of the left leg. So what made it a life and death situation was I was losing a ton of blood.
Right. Yeah.
But because of my cycling and running and all that jazz, I had a good cardiovascular system. So temporarily,
Hmm.
we could rely on other arteries and veins while
Yeah.
that one was damaged. So that's why she says, like, the bike nearly killed you, but in a lot of ways it saved your life.
It saved
And
you.
that was sort of the beginning of like my journey. I went into the ICU
Yeah.
for several days. I came out and I began my recovery, but I was really upset with like the world. The driver had a revoked license. And
Crazy, yeah.
I was just, and it's unfortunately, this, like we all know people, if you're in the cycling world, that have been hit by a
Yeah.
driver, whether they're distracted or not, or worse, have passed away, have died, have been killed by
Yeah.
a driver. So, we do a sport that has some danger and some risk to it. But I also believe that like just living is risky. And I'm going to be smart about the risk, but I know I can't control everything in life, but I still
Yeah.
want to live fully. The reason why I call it my last bad day, there's a Buddhist parable called the first arrow, second arrow. And
Okay.
the way the parable goes is that there's a warrior who goes into the woods and he or she or they is shot by an arrow. Someone shoots an arrow at them and they're struck by it. And it causes great pain and suffering. But the warrior ruminates on being shot. Like, who shot this at me? How can I get back at them? What's going to become
Right,
of
yeah.
me? That's the second arrow. And we shoot second arrows at ourselves. So, and we could probably dive further into this. Basically, my accident was a first arrow and a pretty
Yeah.
big arrow moment,
Yes, for sure.
right? But I call it my last bad day because I made a commitment. I wasn't going to shoot any more second arrows at myself, making the situation worse. And
Yeah.
so if I can go to bed each night and my girls and my wife and other people who I love and love me back are in my life, then I can't call the day a bad day. Like, I've had bad moments. I've had angry. I've been pissed off. I've been happy and joyous. But we live life moment to moment. And to chalk up a day in a very binary, well, this was a good day or this was a bad day, doesn't honor all the different moments that we live in the course of a day.
Yeah.
And it doesn't honor the people that we have in our lives. So to say the day was bad and so defiantly and, like exclamation point, I think takes away from the fact that we still have people in our lives that we can count on and count on us. And we can come back hopefully tomorrow and start again, begin again. So I decided to label that day as my last bad day because that was a first arrow moment. I wasn't going to shoot any more second arrows at myself. That was my commitment. And it was an acknowledgement that we're living moments to moments to moments. And if I have people who I love and love me back, I can't call a day that's filled with moments bad because there's still a lot of love in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very, very profound. It's a so there's a few things to unpack there. First one being that you are recovering from this accident, near fatal accident, that you have this realization, you have this mindset shift where you decide, no, I don't want to put myself down, let my inner thoughts take the better of me. And then the realization that there is an opportunity here to almost being given a second chance at life, perhaps, if you want to call it like that, or I call it like that. And so it's interesting because so many times you do have as in life, but as when riding bikes, you kind of a lot of things are outside of your control, and you have to take it in your stride to overcome obstacles, difficulties, whether it is in work, at life, and especially when riding a bike. That analogy is, we were talking before we started recording about, suffering a puncture. That's just a bump on the ride that is not the end of the ride. It won't make it bad or worse. You just need to fix it. You just need to acknowledge it and move on. And I'm interested in finding out from this experience, like, was there any specific mental strategies that you employed? I mean, to recover, really, because this is like a life-changing accident that put you in a different trajectory. Is that something that we, through your transformative experience, that I can learn, people that are listening can also learn?
Yeah, I think definitely people can learn it. And I would say, going back to the analogy about a puncture, if you switch to tubeless, you can actually get back on the road a little bit faster too. So I didn't mention that before we hit record, but and I say that as a late adopter to tubeless technology. So I was running
Yeah.
tubes for a long time. But you know, one of my mentors during my recovery told me that everything was neutral until I labeled it. So like one aspect that I brought into my recovery is like things are just, it's neutral. You can be really wise about your labels and how you label your life and the situations in your life. And this whole like analogy of like cycling is life. It gives you so much, like headwinds, crosswind, tailwinds, punctures, hills, downhills, detours. For me, what was really helpful is I started a gratitude practice while I was in the hospital. So that gave me a chance to look at the things that were working well in life, as opposed to everything I didn't have or couldn't do. So, tying it back into cycling, how many times do we go on a ride and like the wind's really brisk and strong, or the weather, and all we do is focus in on like, oh my God, this sucks
The
so
bad
much. This
things,
is
yeah.
so bad. And it's like, hello, you're out in nature, you're riding your bike, you're not working unless you're a UCI pro or something like that. But
Yeah.
you're like, you're still outside getting a workout in. So it's like, and it's not going to be windy like this forever. The ride's going to end. Like you'll get through it. And you know what? In a lot of ways, it builds character, right? And that's who couldn't use a little bit more character. And I say that, and I've been on rides where I'm like, holy cow, will the wind ever die down? So I am perfectly imperfect with all this. But gratitude was a big key. And also my practice of mindfulness. So mindfulness, I do, credit for helping me get through my recovery and helping me heal. I credit it for helping me be successful through like traditional lenses of success in the corporate world, and like coming into this space as being an entrepreneur, but also like as a cyclist. Like we mentioned up front, like cycling can be meditative, but it really can be like using mindfulness as a way to ride. And so it's like the only thing you can control right now on a ride is this pedal stroke. And so it also helps you have more knowledge of your body. So we listen to our body more. I don't wear any wearable technology. And if someone out there wears wearables, cool, if it helps you. But I do believe that if we have a more intimate relationship with our body, and we listen to what our body's whispering to us, we don't need really anything to tell us what's happening in our body. We can, the great Eddie Merckx didn't have, a wearable. Like, he rode lots, and there could be like
It
a
just
whole,
worked hard.
yeah, and we could have a whole other podcast about all that and life back then, a whole thing. But like, I do think like mindfulness can help us have a better relationship with the body, and it can help us through the muddy moments of a ride or of life. And one of the tips that when I first started to learn how to mountain bike, I was in college, and there was a guy, an older guy, who had gotten into mountain biking. He wasn't a roadie; he was a mountain bike. He was like an original mountain biker, sort of off the grid before there was a grid. And,
Yeah. Oh,
you
wow.
know,
Old school.
old school, right? And in mountain biking, you come up to obstacles, creeks, streams, rocks, logs. And he would say, listen, to go through these obstacles, just keep pedaling, like keep your momentum up. And so that's the whole notion of like, keep pedaling. And mindfulness helps us, in keeping pedaling through our muddy moments of life, because we're going to have rides and aspects of life where we feel like we have a tailwind and we're flying and it's like we feel like so strong, and then we're going to have moments where we're going to feel sluggish and it's muddy. And
Yeah.
it's key to like try to figure out a way to keep pedaling.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds of the importance again of everything comes with a perspective. Coming back to the point of everything is neutral until you give it a meaning, and applied to riding bikes, to the pleasure that it brings to me and to many other people, to you as well, is that, as you said, it allows you to be in that element, allows you to focus and just it's kind of in a way in your own space, where distractions kind of fall by the wayside. And I think that's, and returning to the meditation aspect of it, is allows us to kind of take a pause and to breathe and understand that there are aspects of life, of business, whatever position you are in, that there will be always a different perspective that you can look. There's a different way of looking at the problem. And
Yeah.
well, this is from my own experience. Many other people will have different ways of looking at it. But I think riding a bike gives you that sense of freedom, that looking at problems in a different way.
Yeah, no, I love that, Pedro. Like, just the other day, we had a group ride on Wednesday night, and we were all sharking around waiting for the ride to begin. And one of my friends, like, tapped me on the shoulder and he pointed to my rear wheel, and it was soft. And so
Oh,
I was like, and we were about to start the ride. The ride goes off at 6 p.m. It's like 5:58. He's like, "What's going on with your rear wheel?" And I hadn't noticed it, like just hanging around, which probably wasn't all that mindful of me. But the thing is that in that moment, right? And I think we can all appreciate this moment as cyclists who are listening. It's like, oh my God, like the ride's about to start, and like what am I gonna do? And like I'm gonna delay everything, and I'm gonna be that person on the ride that slows us all down, and we can have a little bit of a mini freak out.
yeah,
And
for sure.
I was like, okay, it's the tire's soft. Um, these things happen. So mindfulness gives us this ability through practice of meeting our moments with some level of equanimity. So a sense of like, we got this, a little bit of calm, much like a surfer riding a wave. And I was like, okay, we'll put some, we'll fix the tire. We'll put some sealant in it. We'll spin it around. We'll pump it up. And it'll take a few minutes. And that's what it did. It took a few minutes. The other folks, because I think I approached it with my energy, like, we got this. It's only going to be a couple minutes. Everyone else was like chilling out. And we started the ride at 6:03 or 6:04. Still fine.
Yeah.
But so often we, like in life or on a ride, if something unfortunate happens that we don't anticipate, we can get so upset that it it steals the joy out of life and the ride. And so, okay, flat tires happen, mechanicals happen, uh, weather changes. Okay,
Yeah.
it's not going to last forever. We'll get it done, and then we'll try to find a way to keep pedaling.
Precisely. Very, very wise words. I wanted to touch, because we have been talking about mindfulness, and I wanted to touch upon this aspect of visualization and performance. You have your own app called Pause, Breathe, and Reflect. And I wanted to understand, how does visualization kind of play the role in your recovery from your accident, and like how do you still apply it on and off the bike presently? You're
Yeah.
kind of we already discussed this, but just wanted to understand that part of the visualization aspect.
Yeah, it's a great question. And thanks for referencing the app. Yeah. So Pause, Breathe, Reflect is the meditation practice I created when I was in the hospital to help slow everything down because I was overwhelmed by the extent of my recovery. And since my accident, went on with great study to become a qualified meditation teacher. So there's a ton of meditations on the app for people to really like meet all the different moments of life. So in their shorter
Yeah.
practices. But on the app, I do have practices that are more cycling related and ones around visualization because this has been key. So I would spend some time visualizing my approach to rehab, um, even my ride across the country. So I was talking to someone before I rode across America because eventually
Yeah.
I got back on the bike and got back into racing and then riding my bike across the country. And we like I've this year I'll do Unbound XL, in Kansas. And so I'm visualizing that right now. So what I try to do is spend some time just visualizing the whole thing, trying to bring all my senses to the
Wow.
experience. So it's, we'll take Unbound XL for an example. Like, it's I'm there in Kansas, I'm at the start, visualizing like how I'm going about riding through the
Mm-hmm.
night, visualizing the rough terrain, visualizing the fatigue, but just also visualizing myself getting through all these moments. And I even like visualize, okay, what happens when it rains? Like how do I respond to that, right? Because you can respond
Yeah.
in a way like, oh my God, it's over this, and then you let the rain totally. The rain is the first arrow. The second arrow is all the fretting and rumination you do about the rain. So in a lot of ways, like I'm racing Unbound multiple times before I even get to Kansas. And so going back to my ride across America, someone said, "What makes you think you can do this?" Like, you
Really?
know,
Wow. Okay.
like yeah, which I was like, well, okay, a fair question. I did it with a total knee replacement and obviously going through what I've gone through. And I said, like I visualized doing this ride across America hundreds of times. So like the wind
Mm.
in Wyoming or the hills in the Rockies in the Colorado,
Yeah.
like, and so when I came to it, it wasn't like the first time I came to it. And so visualization in terms of riding or doing a Grand Fondo or a century or a race can help us because the brain lays down this memory and then it can be familiar to us. And so then
Exactly. Yeah.
and we lay down like good affirmations or good language around it. So when we do meet a tough moment in the Grand Fondo or Unbound, we have already practiced in a lot of ways how to get through it with a little bit more grace than, say, if we didn't do it.
When you look at elite athletes, professional athletes that go to the Olympics or in any discipline, they will do that. They will visualize. They will visualize whether it's a race, 100-meter race, whether it is a bike race. They visualize what is step, the corners, the course, how they will feel. And I don't know if they go into that level of experiencing the six senses. Sorry, five.
Your intuition, Pedro, can be the sixth sense, but like, I, I think like, but to your point though, like Michael Phelps, the great Olympian swimmer,
Yes.
he has spoken often about his visualization practice, and you know, we
Mm-hmm.
we talk about this all the time, like, how much of sport is mindset and how much of it is physical. And so
Yeah.
we over index on the physical. Like, we we're downloading our rides on Strava and Training Peaks, and we have this great affiliation now with Zone 2 training, which has always been a thing, to be honest. Like, I'm old enough to be like, that was just called like slow, steady distance, long, steady distance, LSD training. So we do all this like work on like our rides and our fitness, our physical ability. But I don't think the cycling community is doing enough around really honing in on mindset. I think, that needs to be trained just as much as, zone 2 or zone 5 in order to be able to perform at the level we want to perform at. And also, I do think like within many circles of cycling, even at the high echelons of the sport, there is a mental health challenge that I think a lot of athletes face and are currently facing it very silently. If mental health is a thing to be aware about, mindful of, and talk about as a greater society, then cyclists are a segment of the greater society. So, we have things that I think we could address in terms of our own mental well-being that help us perform better, but also just live better. And I think mindfulness and visualization can help us with that.
Yeah, for sure. It brings back as well the fact that, well, as you said, the brain is also a muscle that you need to exercise. And, in the same way that perhaps you had to work on yourself through your recovery from the near fatal accident to, not shoot arrows, like you said, on yourself. So you called it my last bad day. It's working on your mind, working on your mindset, so that you're not limiting yourself by imposing barriers. And that's a very key aspect of mindfulness, of being grateful, and visualization that applies to, whether you are training for your first Gran Fondo, whether you're thinking about your next goal in life, in business, whatever it is. It applies to anything that if you kind of ground yourself and think about and visualize what you can achieve, and set your mind to it, then it makes it easier to get there.
Yeah, I think it should be a tool that we all have access to, and develop over time. I think it can make us stronger in many aspects of life and better in cycling. And it's not a soft thing. It's not a woo-woo thing. Like, sharpening your mindset is something that top professionals do and top athletes and performers do. It's one ecosystem. The mind and body are not separate. It's all working together. So we should work the ecosystem. If we spend a ton of time thinking about what we're taking in from a nutrition perspective of how we're treating our bodies and training, as we've just mentioned, we should also include the mind to make sure that we can be as healthy as possible with our mind. So I love working with athletes because we can find a way to use mindset to help them with their training, their performance, and as you just mentioned, it spills over into all aspects of our lives. It's a fascinating topic that I just love. And I really came into it through my recovery. So that was the spark that really did it for me.
Yeah, precisely. You set yourself a huge challenge, in my eyes anyway. It might be different for you, which is Rise to Ripple challenge, which is like 20 years after your traumatic accident, you set your challenge of riding across America. And for the people that don't know, you had, before you started this ride, you had a full knee replacement surgery. Is that correct?
Yeah, my left knee had a total knee replacement, and
Yeah.
it was a custom total knee replacement because my accident was like so vicious. So I have custom bikes, and now I have a custom knee.
I said I'm I'm interested in this because you mentioned earlier about someone, saying, how do you think you can achieve this? And it comes back to very neatly into what we have been discussing just now, which is visualization, see the training to do, but aligning as well with the mindset, the right mindset to do that. And there is a lot of things that you have experienced through this, the challenge, the riding across America, and the significance of it. Were there any lessons that you learned through the ride? Maybe like through discovering yourself a bit more, through the people that you met along the way, the places that you saw.
Yeah.
Because that's when you go on a ride, and we just mentioned earlier on, you can be doing the same loop over and over again, but if you are in the present, if you are paying attention, you notice different things, you are aware of your surroundings, and that can change the whole ride. The just because it's the same route doesn't mean that it's going to be boring.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, my route across America, 99% of the ride were all new roads to me. Like
Yeah.
it was really wild. So we went from Astoria, Oregon to Washington, D.C. So there's so many awesome lessons from the ride. I'll give you one. So we don't make the podcast like 12 hours long for listeners. So, so as I planned it, I was going to take the quintessential Transamerica Trail. That's a trail that was created back in 1976 to ride across America. And that's like the one trail that the one route that a lot of people think of when they do the ride across America. And there's good mapping to it and the whole thing like that. But you have to go through Kentucky. And as I was doing research, I went on YouTube, and there were some people that had done it and put up YouTube videos, and they talked about the dogs, the wild dogs of Kentucky. And growing up, I've been chased by many a dog in my day, and not all the experiences were all that joyful. Like sometimes the dogs caught me, and like as a young kid, it was traumatic. So I was like, man, like I really don't want to go through Kentucky and deal with all these dogs. And I'm going through the rural parts of America, so the dogs are sort of loose. There's no fences and there are no leash laws and stuff like that. So this is in the back of my mind the whole time planning it. But like this is the route. So this is the route you're supposed to ride, right? So a little analogy to life. This is how you're supposed to live your life. This is the path you're supposed to go down. So we get to Rawlins, Wyoming. And as I'm running across, we're running into other cyclists. And there was a couple that came into the same diner we were having lunch at. So we were in Rawlins, and I had finished up the day. We went to go grab a bite to eat at a diner restaurant. And they came in, and we gave that nod that cyclists, like, oh, you're a cyclist too. Yeah. And you sort of know, like, Rawlins is in the middle of nowhere. So they're like, they're not like locals out for a ride. They're riding across the country. And so they come over, or we go over, and we start talking about, like, they're asking me, what should I expect? We're going west. They're going to go to Oregon. So what should we expect? We have a few days left, and we tell them. And then we ask, so it's good to be curious. That's one of the lessons. What should we expect? They explained what to expect. And then I said, tell me about the dogs of Kentucky. And they were like, oh, that's an interesting question. And you're like, oh boy. So, and so what happened was, I was like, I don't want to do that. So that very afternoon, I rerouted the whole trip. So once we got to Kansas, the middle part, we went, instead of going through Kentucky, we went north, and we went through Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And instead of finishing up in Yorktown, Virginia, we finished up in Washington, D.C., which happens to be the city that my wife and I met and we had our
Okay.
first daughter there. So it was very appropriate, right? And we got to
Yeah.
ride on some iconic rails to trails in the United States. So the big lesson to this is like, don't fall in love with your plan, right? We start off with this plan about how we're going to go through life or how the ride's going to be. And a lot of times we grab onto it, we cling onto it, like, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. And if we can just ease our grip a little bit, so it's not such a white knuckle ride, there's a little bit of space to say, okay, well, maybe there's some new circumstances. Maybe something new has changed and we need to like change our plan.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah. It's true.
so glad like we changed our plan, because the route we created, it was called the Eastern Expressway, went through some beautiful parts of the country. And I still got chased by a couple dogs on this route, but I didn't get chased as frequently as I think I would have going through Kentucky. And it
Yeah.
was really cool that we got to finish in DC, and we still have a lot of friends who live there. So they were able to meet us at the Lincoln Memorial, and it was much more fitting. Like, so I started off
Yeah.
planning this route like everyone else does it. It's the Transamerica Trail or bust. That's the route. That's what you have to do. But this moment of curiosity was like, okay, well, let's explore this. And then having the courage to change your game plan in the middle of your ride, to say, we're going to go this way and we're going to see how this unfolds. And I'm not saying it's a guarantee that it's going to unfold perfectly,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
we should have enough courage to say, I'm not going to necessarily stick to my plan if circumstances are telling us that we should make a shift, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. I have fallen victim of victim, if you can call a victim of
Yeah.
that. Setting whether that is a route, a cycling route, and then it's like, no, I have to do it without changing it, or in my own projects, just not being flexible enough to or recognize that, well done, that there is something here that needs to be changed. You can't, obviously this path is not going to be the best one, so take stock and just reassess where you need to go. And I think it's a very good lesson to learn. And again, it applies to anything that whether it is a bike route, an adventure, a trip, a business plan, wherever it is. And I think that's it kind of I don't know, but that kind of connects as well, perhaps, with the kind of the journey that you have been on. Kind of a lesson that kind of is one of the main lessons, I think, that comes through perhaps your experience. So that for people listening, I think that's an important aspect to take away, if anything else.
Yeah.
And this doesn't resonate. Being able to be adaptable, flexible, and not be a stickler to the plan.
Yeah. Just giving yourself a little bit of wiggle room. My memoir is entitled Shift, and so we have when I first started cycling, I had like a 5-speed straight block, and now with electronic shifting, we got 20 speeds and the whole shebang. So why not use all of the gears? Like, why not? We don't have to just be riding in one gear the whole time, unless you're a bike messenger and you're on 50. So yeah.
Oh, that's the metaphors keep on coming.
Yeah, they do. I can pull this thread, baby, all day long. Yeah. That's how but I do think, going back to the quote that you started the show with, our conversation with, is like cycling is life. So I think there's so many beautiful analogies and metaphors that really do apply. And I'm not sure how popular, like Ted Lasso. I'm not sure if you know the show Ted Lasso.
I've heard of it, but I don't think I've seen it.
So it was really big here in the States because it gave us an insight to like European soccer, because we're still catching up on that. But there's a a line in the show that like football is life, right? Or in America, soccer is life. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, 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 no. Like cycling is life. Like it's out there in the open, in the traffic. We only have a thin like layer of lycra protecting us. There's so much there. And I think there's so many, beautiful stories that can be told through the lens of cycling as it relates to life.
I mean, I've had many guests coming to the podcast already and so tell transformative stories of how the bike is shaping their lives and now helping inspire others, like very much like your story,
Yeah.
like your journey has been. I wanted to focus. I mean, we have been discussing and I think we have been touching a bit about this question, but it's kind of a tradition of the podcast to ask every guest that comes on, what does success look like to you?
Well, it feels peaceful. If
That's an
there's a
interesting.
feeling to it,
Hmm.
there's a peace. And I think there's also like a fluidity to it in an openness. I think that's the feeling. There's a story from like my early professional days. I went, you're not making much money, and I had to go get money out
Yeah.
from the ATM.
Yeah.
And I went there, and I just wanted $10, and I didn't have enough. I had like $4 in my account,
Wow.
and I just remember like the stress of that. It felt constricting and limiting. And I don't view success through the lens of money, but
Yeah.
for me, it was about that feeling of like, I want to be able to go to the ATM and feel, I don't want it to be stressful. That I want to be able to have enough success. Again, now it is through the lens of money, where I know something's going to come out. Like I have enough to like live on and be able to support my family,
Of
and
course.
but it's really more the feeling of like openness and fluidity and a feeling of connection to oneself and to each other. Like we're meant to be together. Like I talk about this all the time, like this whole concept, like who's in your peloton. So one definition of success is like, who are you riding with in life? And hopefully you're riding with people who bring out the best in you. So
Yeah.
people will say their group is a squad or a tribe or a posse or whatever. But for me, when I think of groups, if I think of community, I think of like who's in your peloton. Like we
Hmm.
are riding together. Another cycling metaphor. Here it comes.
Yeah.
But it's like just like knowing that you're part of a community that has a like-heartedness,
Hmm.
and there's that openness and fluidity to life. To me, that's how life feels when it's successful.
Yeah. Just interesting that just listening to that just made me feel calm and relaxed. And it's a very, very well, for me, interesting take. Very different from any other response I had here on the podcast so far. And it does kind of invites, I think, everyone to kind of calm, just again take a pause and reflect and just take stock and just like
It's a
just chill a
feeling.
little bit.
Chill a
Yeah.
little bit. Like, if I could add, I'd say like success is also about having one more bike than I currently have. Right. So that, like, so you can't have too many
N
bikes.
plus one.
Plus one. It's like, it's really living the, B plus one, like, I just think that as a planet, we could just chill a little bit. Like the whole concept of like go slow to go fast. Like just, I'm not saying stop, but just
Yeah.
sometimes it's like we just need to tap our brakes just a little bit in order to like help us see more, And it actually helps us go faster at the end of the day. And I think we're just rushing too much in this world and reacting too much, and we're on this hamster wheel, and we really don't know where we're going. I think if we could just like take a step back and just tap the brakes just a bit, I think that could really help us. And that's the whole concept of pause, breathe, reflect, like shorter practices to allow us to tap our brakes, to slow it down a little bit, catch our breath, and like really be like thoughtful. That's the reflect piece. Thoughtful about how we want to go forward.
Very good. That's a brilliant answer. I wanted to now to come to the part of the podcast, the tradition of the podcast, where every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. And I think this is a very appropriate question for you. So the question is this: what advice would you give your younger self?
I would tell my younger self to be patient. Give it time for things to unfold with a little bit more grace. Had I gotten that advice, I might not have had my accident. So this gets into this like, weird thing of like, if you could turn back time and your accident didn't happen, would you want it not to happen? And my answer is like, no. Like, what it did is it changed our lives fundamentally. It did open me up. I had to go through a lot of great pain, but I'm taking that really tough, horrible moment and putting a good ripple into the world, trying to help others. And so if I didn't go through that, like, who knows what would have happened? It could have been, might have been better or worse. But like, so it's really coming into like, really honoring like what we have gone through, because this story is not just my story. It's the story of my wife and our daughters and everyone else it ripples into. But I would have told my younger self, like, it's going to be, you're going to be okay. Just be patient. Don't be in a rush. Let things unfold. Be graceful.
Very good. Michael, it's been honor to have this conversation with you. I think I've come to this conversation really excited about learning more about you and having the moment of connection with you. I have really achieved that. The insights that you share really kind of set the tone for me to like think about how can I do things differently, whether that is be more patient, take stock, be more curious. And I hope that this conversation also has inspired people listening. And so I wanted to ask, if people are interested to want to know a bit more about you and what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, great question. And thanks again, Pedro, for having me on. Like I mentioned up front, I've been looking forward to this all week, and really since the moment we connected. So it's, through podcasting, we can make the planet feel a little bit smaller. And
for sure.
Yeah, it's just really cool. And I feel, really honored to be part of your community now. And we'll definitely have to get a ride in together. So, next time I'm over in the UK, I'll bring my bike and I will draft off of you, because I've seen some of your Strava rides, and you're laying down some pretty good rides. So I'll suck on your wheel. So people can reach me like through the app. They can get the app through the App Store or Google Play. Okay. And the really cool thing is that they can pay what they can for the first year. So I want to make mindfulness really accessible to everyone. And I can also be found on Instagram at Pause, Breathe, Reflect, or the Mindful Cyclist. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, you can just put in Michael O'Brien and Peloton Coaching, and you should be able to find me.
Wow, what a great conversation with Michael. His humor, his story, his transformative journey is so inspirational. His experience reminds me of the importance of not just taking life as it comes, but actively shaping one's journey through thoughtful reflection and a steadfast commitment to personal growth. And now, if you have listened this far into the episode, please remember to leave us a review. It helps me grow the podcast and continue to bring you amazing guests. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, just type Pedro Couto Lopez and you'll find me on LinkedIn. And remember to tune in to next week's episode, where again, I'll take you on a learning journey with another inspirational guest. Until then, thanks for listening.